Welcome to episode 16 of Unplanned with Phil Bland. And today I've got Hannah Salton with me. She's had a career in recruitment in London and has a lot of expertise in understanding people's kind of decisions about how they build their careers. And she's recently gone out on her own to build her own career coaching offering. So I thought Hannah would be a great person to speak to, and Hannah and I knew each other when I was living back in London in 2014 or something. So
I forget, yeah, something like that.
I thought she'd be a great person to speak to. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Great. So I guess I'm starting all of these things off with just like a kind of base level, because something that's important to me is like living in the moment and just kind of understanding where you're at right now with things, and then we can kind of go into the story of how things have happened. But just like on a general level, how are you doing? How are you coping with the lockdown?
Yeah, pretty fine. I think it's one of those things people ask you every day, you know, how are you? How are things? And I think very often the automatic is just to go with a generic response. So I'll try and add a bit more detail. But
yeah,
it's been fine. I've been in my flat in East London with my husband. So neither of us have been ill or got coronavirus. So
right.
It's one of those things, can't complain, you know, that so many people have it worse off than you. But I definitely normally have a very active social life. And so I've definitely missed that. But in the grand scheme of things, just trying to make the most of it.
Yeah, I think you at these points in time, you realize what's important. Like, I've got older parents now. I think some of us are getting to that kind of stage in life. When we were all hanging out in London, we were in our 20s and going out and partying and things. And then you get to this point, and then something like this comes along, and the fragility of life starts to like be concerning. And I think a lot of people don't really think about, the fact that it's not going to last forever in a lot of ways, and something like this brings it home.
I think it's one of those things, though. I think it is a balance, in the sense of, I think it is really good to be grateful for what you've got and really appreciate things like that. But I also think that I've had a few conversations recently of people feeling really, really guilty if they're struggling. And I think it's appreciating what you've got, but also, for me at least, it's when I have had down days or when I have felt really fed up or whatever, it's allowing myself to feel that, because I think you can't guilt yourself into feeling better by reminding yourself that others have it worse than you. I think it's just that balance between being grateful for what you've got, but also acknowledging that everyone feels pretty crap sometimes.
Yeah, it's like judgment, like, and also that kind of comes to like judging yourself, being like not being hard on yourself when things aren't going exactly as you hope that they would, or you're not exercising twice a day and doing 50 press-ups, things. I think it's just hard to for a lot of people to, like, especially with social media and things, you can see what other people are doing, and people judge themselves in comparison to others.
Definitely. And I've done a couple of webinars recently on productivity, working from home and things like that. And again, I think it's one of those things, if productivity is something that if you want to be productive, if you want to, go a million miles an hour and be really efficient, that's fine. But also I think it's just the pressure. It's pressure from other people or pressure that you put on yourself. And ultimately, if that's not what you want, then it shouldn't be something that you're forcing. And I think that hopefully one of the few positive things that is going to come from this pandemic is people learning, hopefully, to be a bit more compassionate with themselves and other people, because you can't guilt trip and you can't shame yourself into being productive. I think really it has to come from wanting that, rather than feeling like everyone else is being productive, I need to be productive. It needs to almost come from yourself.
Yeah. That kind of rings true a lot for people. I think for me it's been a bit of kind of time for accepting that things aren't going to necessarily play out how you expect them to. And that's a big part of it. It's just accepting that the, like with this thing is called Unplanned, and part of it is like going through a process of unplanning things, and like it's unraveling, it's cathartic, it's kind of thinking, you might have these expectations about the way that 2020 was going to go, but then actually it's not going to turn out the way that you expected it to or wanted it to.
Mm,
A lot of people have had to have their weddings cancelled. A lot of people I'm seeing are having birthdays in lockdown. I had my birthday in April in lockdown, and
mm,
so, but you can't plan. Life events come along, and it's just like either you switch your perspective on it, or you just you'll end up beating yourself up about
mm,
not being able to fulfill your expectations in the new environment that we live in.
yeah,
And everything's
definitely.
changed.
I think a huge thing as well is it really makes you realize how much is out of your control. And I think as humans, we have a bit of an obsession with wanting to plan everything and wanting to control everything. And then something like this happens, and it reminds you how little control you have over so much.
Mm.
But one thing that I am always trying to do personally, and trying to encourage people, especially that are looking for new jobs at the moment, is focus on what you can control. And there is so much that you can't, but actually in terms of your mindset, in terms of your behavior, in terms of whether you adapt a daily routine or exercise, focus on what you can control, because I think sometimes it's very easy and natural to spend so much time worrying and thinking about what you can't control. You're ignoring the opportunity to focus on what is within your power and what you can control.
Mm. It kind of reminds me of this book that I read recently, or it's a series of books by a guy called Nassim Taleb, and he talks about anti-fragility. And it's basically like the first book is about randomness, and basically the world's random, you can't plan things, it's all out of your control. And the second book is about black swan events, like this one, where something will come along, you can't plan for it, you've never seen it before. It's like before you've seen a black swan, you assume that all swans are white, but
Mm,
then a black swan comes along and then changes everything that you thought that was the
mm,
world. And then the third book is called Anti-Fragile, where he essentially says, you can be the opposite of fragile isn't robust or resilient. Like if you shake a box of glasses and it's got fragile on it, then the glasses are going to break. But then if you shake a box with robust or resilient on it, the glasses just stay the same. But you can control the things that like make you that allow you to benefit from the disruption in a way, and you can put yourself in a position to be almost anti-fragile in a
mm,
way, so that when the world comes along and shakes you, which it inevitably will, you can benefit from it
mm.
and be stronger as a result. And I think
Yeah.
we as humans have a kind of difficult uh, that we find it difficult to comprehend that
Mm.
as a concept.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So I guess I wanted to kind of like dive into a bit of your journey,
Hmm.
because it's been an interesting one. It's like you've obviously uh, decided gone on a path, and then decided to take a different route at some point.
Mm.
And I guess life is all about the choices that we make, and you could have continued going down one path, but you've decided to take another. So I guess just kind of going right back, coming out of university and things, what was important to you, and how did you make some of your decisions about where you were taking your career?
I think looking back at university, I was pretty clueless. I went to Manchester and studied management, and I really liked university, had a great time. But I think, like many people, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what I could do, and randomly applied for a few graduate schemes. I remember I always felt like everyone on my course knew so much more than I did, or was so much more prepared, and they were talking about internships, and I just never even heard of them. So I ended up starting a graduate program at BT, which in 2009, which was good because I got to try a lot of different things. It was a rotational program.
Mm.
Um, but I hadn't worked in an office before, so it was definitely a weird transition going straight from university to a corporate role when I hadn't done any internships, I hadn't worked in an office, and both of my parents were teachers. So I wasn't raised in a sort of corporate environment. And yeah, I think the first 6 months in particular, sort of straight out of uni into the corporate world, it was definitely a big challenge for me. And I think I was surrounded by people who I just assumed were all so much more talented and so much more right for the scheme than me. And yeah, it was just a bit of an adjustment, kind of learning and yeah, just learning a lot about myself more than anything.
Where do you think some of those like feelings came, like was it things that people said to you at the time, or was it just like, where do you think those things came from?
I would say it's mainly internal doubt rather than external stuff. So I think I started my career feeling like I'd sort of snuck in the back door and I'd almost tricked my way into a graduate program and I didn't quite feel like I deserved it. And I think starting on day one like that is tricky because you're almost looking for evidence that you're not good enough. And I know I certainly did that. Anything that I didn't understand or anything that was overwhelming, it was proof that I wasn't in the right place for me.
Mm.
And I definitely think a lot of that came from inside really, and just not really knowing many people that had done a similar thing before and not really feeling like I had the tools to navigate and to learn on the job really.
That makes sense. Yeah, I guess, yeah, I've had those moments of doubt where you're kind of in a slightly uncomfortable position. I think it's just getting to the place, like I think early in your career, you don't realize that life, the only parts of your life that you're going to grow are the parts in your life where you feel uncomfortable in those
Yeah.
situations. But
No, definitely.
at that time, you just think that it's the end of the world. Everybody's going to judge me. I'm exposed. I'm afraid that I'm going to be found out. But I think as you put yourself through a couple more of those situations, the confidence builds, and you start to think, actually, that by putting myself out there and making myself vulnerable, those were the most powerful or biggest leaps forward that
Yeah.
I took as a result.
Definitely. And it's one of those things, I know it inside out now that that is true, but I even now I still find it difficult, you know, if something goes wrong or doesn't go to plan or I feel like I failed at something, there is still absolutely for me that emotional response, that emotional reaction,
Mm.
feeling guilty or ashamed or worried, even though I know intellectually that it will make me more resilient and I'll learn from it. I think that's the thing. You can know something academically, but it can still feel painful when you're going through it.
Mm,
But I
mm,
totally
mm.
agree. And I look back now and think that kind of rocky start and then another kind of rough patch that I had a few years into my career, it's not just a case of, oh, I got through it and survived. It is actually a case whereby I don't think I would have been as self-aware and I don't think I would have been as I just don't think I don't think I would have career changed and done something that I really want to do had I not gone through those kind of really tricky periods.
Mm, mm. So did you go through like career like up the career path, like trying to get promoted and going through appraisals and these types of things? Like how was that experience for you?
Well, it was funny because I never ever considered myself to be ambitious up until about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I had kind of grown up thinking that being driven and being ambitious was akin to, you know, being not that nice a person or being a bit reckless.
Mm,
So I didn't really realize that you can be ambitious in your career and want to achieve and want to be successful. And, you know, that's not the opposite of being a nice person. You can aim for both. So I kind of I think I did want to progress in the corporate world, but for me it was more of a case of proving that I wasn't really bad. It was more a case of trying to reassure myself that I could get promoted to prove that I deserved to be there in the first
mm,
place.
mhm.
So yeah, I stayed at BT for 5 years, and really, really loved it, and was in graduate recruitment for a long time, and then thought, well, I've, you know, been here, I probably should do something else. I want to progress. And so then I went on for 3 years to manage graduate recruitment for a law firm. And that was a really tricky transition as well, because I was managing the whole team for the first time. So I studied management, I'd read loads of books on leadership, but I think for me, nothing prepared me for actually being responsible for managing a team. And it was definitely a huge imposter syndrome time, for sure.
So what did you learn, like, that you couldn't read in books? There's a big deal about like learning in practice versus learning in
Yeah,
theory, and like that's a lot of people scorn people that learn from books because it's not practical. You're just getting wisdom from both other people, and then on the other side, if you don't read anything, then you're not leveraging the knowledge
yeah.
that's come from before.
I think,
So
to be
how?
honest, sorry,
No,
yeah,
no, that's fine.
I think that I actually have learned an incredible amount from books, but you're absolutely right. It's almost that application. When you're at university and you're learning about different styles of management, it's just very, very theoretical, and you don't necessarily put yourself in it. So you might think there's this type of manager, there's this type of manager, but you're not necessarily thinking about how you would fit into that in a real life environment. And actually, I do feel like some of the greatest development and some of the greatest kind of lessons I've learned have been through books, but they have been through like really engaging in the content, really self-reflecting, and then doing things a bit differently.
Mm.
So many people that I work with, like clients, especially graduates who are job hunting, they're really obsessed with getting new information. They just want to consume information, 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 and I get it, and they're keen, and that's great. But I always say it's not just reading, it's not just intaking it. You almost need to digest it and process it and apply it and tweak your behavior in order for like real growth to happen. And I think, yeah, I think that's the key to it really. It's processing it.
What do you think about what do you think about empathy for the individual circumstances? Because I find that that was one of the key things for me moving into a kind of management position was um, treating each person as a different type of person and trying to figure out who they were. Did you
Yeah.
have experiences like that?
Yeah, I think that is super important. It's being flexible, it's adapting to other people. I think for me, the biggest lesson learned being a manager was, well, there were so many things, but I always felt like I needed to be someone that I'm not. So I saw other great managers or other people who were successful in business and felt like I needed to emulate them or look up to them, and kind of I put them on a pedestal and thought I need to be like them. And I
Mm.
think actually when I became a better manager was when I was more myself. And that doesn't mean you can't take learning and get inspired by other people. But I think for me, authenticity is so important. And it's a term that's thrown around a lot, but I didn't really know what it meant until I don't know. I think it's just accepting my strengths, accepting my weaknesses, and just having more faith in myself. I think where I fell down was I'd always sort of try and be a bit of a people pleaser and, please the business, please my team. But really, yeah, you sometimes do have to make tough decisions or do things that are hard. But ultimately, I think having faith in yourself is really important.
Mm. Yeah, I think when I had these experiences, it's important to like build a rapport with the people that you're working with on a human to human level. Quite often it's so easy in big organizations especially to feel like you're just, a cog in the wheel. Processes are standardized, everything's kind of industrial kind of even the titles, everyone's meant to fit into certain kind of boxes, and as a result sometimes it makes you act in a in a way that isn't human, doesn't show empathy towards people. And yeah, like I found that as I managed more people, it was important to even though there was this structure around you that made you think that you had to kind of be so formal, to also find those points of kind of common interests. Different people have some different people care about different stuff. One person's got a parents at older parents at home that they're looking after and they need to leave early. One person's got kids, other people want more money, somebody wants more responsibility. Like, you don't know what different people want it, and also that changes as people get older and they change, so you need to determine what each specific person wants at that specific point in their
Yeah.
career, and keep thinking about how their perspectives might be changing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big part of being able to be flexible and tailor your style or whatever, I think a huge, huge part of that is not shying away from difficult conversations. And that is something that I found really, really difficult. And particularly at the start, I think I got a little bit better, but just being able to ask and really build trust and have honest questions and ask them, and hope for the honest answer of how things really are. Because I think, certainly from reflecting on all of the managers I had in my career, there weren't many that I feel like I could be really, really honest with, or kind of share if I had a problem, or share feedback. And I don't know, I think 90% of problems in the corporate world would be fixed if people were brave enough to have difficult conversations. And that doesn't mean being really critical at all. It means being open and being clear and not shying away from feedback. And if you've got a challenge with someone, being brave enough to have that difficult conversation face to face, but approaching it in the right way.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's also having those difficult conversations, and also being able, one thing is like hard to, you have to not have the same standards for everyone that works with you as you have for yourself all the time. Like, not everybody cares as much about, they're there for different reasons. Some people are trying to progress, other people just want a stable job. And so it's about adapting your approach as a leader,
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
to not try to fit it, and not trying to project what your insecurities are or your own kind of perspectives onto the people that you're managing.
Yeah.
That was a big learning for me, because I was very type A, like when I first started, wanting to progress, wanting to be the best and very competitive. That was just my character in the workplace. And I slowly learned to kind of read people and not expect them to want what I want, but
Mm.
just to try and speak to them in a way that would get the best out of them.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's not even about having higher or lower standards, in my opinion. It's more just different standards. And I think what I think makes a great employee, or I think makes a great professional, might be totally different from what someone else does. Um, and whilst, yeah, so I think almost just recognizing people might try and be their best, but in different ways, or people might view what is their best as different from what you might.
Mm. So you were doing recruitment, and then you were doing the graduate program. So I guess you've seen like the whole spectrum of people in different parts of their careers. So maybe we can kind of turn to the kind of journey that you decided to take, and move more into kind of career coaching, and thinking about that.
Yes. So I guess I made the move a bit over 3 years ago, and yeah, about 3 years ago, kind of. And it was something that I'd thought about for a long time. So for me, the bit of HR, or the bit of recruitment that I liked the most, was the human side of it. It was the people side, it was the developmental side of it. And in recruitment, it's great when you can make people happy, and it's great when you can make people job offers, but there's a lot of other stuff around that, yeah, there's a lot more than that. And coaching was something that I came across quite early on in my career. It was actually, I had some internal coaching in my first year at BT, and that was what really helped transform my experience.
Mm.
So it was something that I'd wanted to do, but I just didn't really know how to make it happen. So it was quite a slow process of thinking about it for a long time, procrastinating, putting it off, but then sort of slowly putting the pieces together, and just planning really. But then I did make a bit of a, I wouldn't say a leap, but I did sort of decide to leave my corporate role, having not done a huge amount of paid coaching, and then sort of focus on that full steam ahead really. And there were definitely a lot of people that thought it was a bit of a risky thing to do, it was a bit of a strange thing to do, but actually, and that really bothered me actually, their kind of questioning of my choices or kind of judgment of my choice really made me doubt my decision, and really made me think maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or maybe I shouldn't be doing such a kind of extreme move. But in a way, even though it felt hard sometimes at the time, I processed it, and actually it made me more committed. It made me more sure that it was the right thing, which I think was really good, because a few months down the line when things were hard, it wasn't like a shock. It was like, yes, this is a big decision, but it's one that I've really fully thought through, so I know that it is right for me.
Yeah, you've got to get the perspectives from other people. I mean, I had a similar journey, deciding to quit a job that I was earning loads of money, and living in New York at the time, and I decided to go on an entrepreneurial journey as well. And a lot of people think you just need to procrastination can be a good process in a way, because it can help you fully think through why you want to do something. Also, you can have the conversations with people who may be, like you say, criticizing or not, or maybe thinking that what you're doing, judging, and also projecting onto you their views about how you should live a happy life. And then the strength and the resolve, like you talk about, comes from listening to advice, but then also tuning it out, and then figuring out what you find important. Like, it's important to both listen and ignore in equal at the same time as one another.
Yeah, I think it's about listening, but almost filtering everything through your lens. It's about talking things through with people, seeking opinions where you want it, but also bearing in mind, exactly as you said, that those opinions come from another person's perspective, who is projecting their expectations and life story onto it. So I think listening can be good, as long as you take things with a pinch of salt, and really think about which you do and do not want to take on board.
And like, what was the process leading up to making the decision to go for it? Why did you decide that I've got to do this?
I had just planned it a lot in advance. So my last sort of year working in the corporate world was when I was doing my coaching qualification. So it was always a plan eventually. And then I just I picked a date with my coach. So the coach that I was privately working with at the time, I just sort of said, this is what I want to do. And I picked a date that seemed really far away. And obviously it came around really quickly. But I think I'd done a lot of planning and a lot of I think I'd just done a lot of planning, maybe isn't the right word, but just thinking things through in terms of, if this doesn't work, then I can do that. And I think that was really, really important to me. And I had a very, very clear, not plan B, but a kind of substitute. So I knew that when I left corporate graduate recruitment and went to be a coach, if things didn't work out, I could have done freelance graduate recruitment work. And because basically I knew a lot of people in graduate recruitment, and I knew I had a few sort of warm leads, and in the end I didn't actually need to do any, but it was really great knowing that I had a plan B. And yes, that freelance work would have been less, wouldn't have been as well paid as my previous role in the corporate world, but it was better paid than I would have been working in a restaurant or working in an administrative role. So I had a clear plan B, and for me it wasn't a case of I'll try coaching, and if it works, great, and if not, I'll do something else. For me, it was a case of when. So, you know, whether it took me a month, whether it took me 6 months, or whether it took a year, at that point, I had done so much reflecting and so much planning that I knew that it was what I wanted to do. I knew I was going to make it work, but I didn't know the timescales. And having that very clear sort of parallel strategy made it a lot more reassuring that I wasn't jumping into something that I didn't almost have a safety net for.
I read a good book by a guy called Adam Grant, where I think it's called Outliers, where he talks a lot about like entrepreneurs and things, and this common misconception that people who are entrepreneurs are very risky, but actually they're usually not in a lot of other aspects in their life, and there's usually a plan B. There's usually like some form of safety net. Like one of the things that I I'm super admire people who take a risk when they're early in their, in their 20s, early 20s, because it must take so much confidence to do that before the world has, or you've managed to extract validation from the world that you're, a competent person that can do something in the world. But once you're in your kind of 30s and you've been working maybe in the corporate world or things like that, you've almost built up a safety net. And then the new challenge is deciding, well, I've got this safety net, so like I've got the credentials that I could go out on my own, but now I might have responsibilities. And so it's like making those balances in later life. How was that for you, kind of thinking about the time of your life to do this?
It was tricky because I always felt like there was an excuse to wait, or I always felt like there was a reason why it wasn't a good idea. There's an argument that you wait until you've had a family, or you wait until you've paid off some of your mortgage or whatever. So for me, there are pros and cons for everything, and there never seemed like a perfect time. Mm-hmm. It was important for me to not rush it. Like, it wasn't something that I ever sort of felt I rushed into. But I think it was also, recognizing that there was always going to be challenges. I think if I remember correctly, the day I handed in my notice from the corporate world, there was a really big issue with Brexit. Like, it was a really key, it wasn't the Brexit vote, but basically I was really nervous about the economy. But then I just thought, who knows what else is going to happen? There's never going to be a perfect time. And I guess one common misconception I think that people have from hearing about my career change is that I must have been really brave and I must have not felt scared. And that is one thing that I'm always really, really common to debunk, because I think it's it was scary, and I did feel scared. And I think that is what puts a lot of people off from career changing or from following a dream or whatever. You are allowed to feel scared, you're allowed to feel fit, but it doesn't need to hold you back. What you need is a calculated plan, you need a safety net, or you need a strategy for if it doesn't work. But it still felt scary, and I think that is just a real common thing, that you have to feel completely brave and confident to make something happen.
So something that you were talking about earlier around, you'd done a lot of reflection about the next step and what you wanted to do. What was it about kind of coaching? Like, what is it that you love so much about what you're doing now that makes it something that you only get one life, so you want to dedicate a large portion of your life to this, I guess. So, why do you do it?
It's hard to sort of answer that without feeling a bit evangelical. But it just, there's so many things that I love about coaching. But I guess the reason why I realized how much I loved it was because of my own personal experiences. And I think that the two times that I mentioned before about going through rough patches in my career is, one was a formal coach, the other was more like informal mentoring. But how the direct impact that had on my confidence, and the direct impact that had on my ability to move forward and grow was just phenomenal. And I think having gone through that, it just really buys you into the practice of it.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I just think kind of going through that and sort of feeling and experiencing the benefits just made me really, really passionate about it.
Mm.
What I do now, it's a bit of a mixture of coaching and consulting. So it's, yes, there is that coaching element, but with my background in recruitment, I am also able to help people with like job search and things like that. And so for me, it just feels like an amazing blend. It feels like it's kind of building on my career, building on the experience that I gained, but also putting it in the context of working with other people and helping them kind of help just, yeah, it sounds just so cheesy, but kind of helping them turn their career around, or make difficult, giving them the confidence to do things that they wouldn't necessarily have done otherwise.
I think a lot of people have like kind of misconceptions about the terminology for these things. So like just at a base level, how would you characterize what a coach does with their, you know, the people that they work with?
Well, what I would say is that that's really common, because even within the coaching industry, people interpret it differently, or people have different specialties. You know, there's life coaching, there's career coaching, there's executive coaching. So I think, first of all, if people are confused about the terms, they're not alone. It is confusing. And I think what's also confusing is the fact that I do coaching and consulting, which some people would think they're quite different. Whereas for me, I think I adapt a coaching approach when I'm working on people for more directive stuff.
Mm.
So for me, coaching is, well, it's about raising self-awareness, it's about raising accountability, and it's about raising confidence. So the tools and how you get to that is different, and it's different for every individual. But I think it's just a process of providing structure and questions, and sometimes tools and resources to help people know themselves better, to enable them to make better choices, or not even better choices, but to enable people to make choices that are more aligned with their real preferences or their values or what they really want to do.
Yeah, and ultimately that are going to result in outcomes that are going to make them happy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people kind of optimize. I don't know what it is, but they optimize too much. They think they're meant to earn lots of money, but what they value is other people's perceptions of them, and how a salary can be a good indicator of status or these types of things. So how do you work with people to kind of, is that a big part of it, trying to reprogram them to think about what's going to make them happy rather than thinking about what they think that they should have?
I think that all of us, I think for everyone, it is really, really difficult to differentiate what is your inner desire or what is your inner preference versus what has been given to you by society, family, peers, friends. And I almost think actually they're not separate. They are so ingrained that I don't think you can ever fully unpick them.
Mm.
I think that all of us are, we're social beings. We like to compare ourselves to other people, and we do use friends and peers as benchmarks. So yes, a big part of what I do is helping people work out what it is they really want, but it's not as simple. It's not simple. It's not a case of you think really hard and, oh yeah, no, that is what I want, because often sometimes your preferences will have been directly impacted or changed by what you've seen or people that you know. So it is really, really tricky. And I think that that desire for external validation, that desire for, whether it is salary or whether it's promotion or whether it's positive feedback from clients or family praising you, I think everyone is very susceptible to it. And even me, who knows a lot about it, is still guilty of it a lot, and definitely still falls into those sort of traps sometimes. So I think it's really complex. But I think, yeah, the more you know yourself, the more you know your values, the more you know your strengths and what your kind of boundaries are, I think the better able you are to make decisions. But I think it's very hard to completely separate external influences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've found that as well. It's hard to kind of drown out the voices around you, but at the same time, kind of have close relationships that you care and value about.
Mm.
You value people's opinions because they're in your circle of trust. So it's like hard to get that balance. One of the words that you used earlier was accountability, and I just love that that as a concept. How do you work with your clients around that?
So in terms of accountability, I think sometimes when people are struggling to make things happen, sometimes when people are feeling low in confidence or low in self-esteem or low in motivation, they find it really hard to kind of self-motivate or to take action, because on a conscious or subconscious level they don't really feel they deserve it, they don't feel like it's possible, they don't feel like they're worth it. And that can lead to a lot of procrastination and a lot of feeling frustrated, and almost that negative self-fulfilling circle almost of, I'm lazy, I've not done it, I'm never going to be good enough, I'm never going to make this happen. And I think sometimes, whether it's with a coach or whether it's with a mentor or even whether it's with a friend or a sort of buddy that you share your goals with, I think there is just something nice about bringing someone else in on that journey. And I think accountability, I think it's a fine line. You want accountability, but you want it from a kind of with respect rather than a I'm doing this for the other person.
Mm.
So I think structure and accountability in a coaching relationship can be helpful, whereby you commit out loud to what it is you want to do, what you as the client agree that you're going to get done by the next session. But I think it has to still, even though it feels like you're accountable to the coach, in a normal coaching relationship, you will still be doing it for yourself rather than to people please or to show
Yeah.
off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And building that trusted relationship to develop them. The also another way that I look at accountability is also in the sense that everything that happens, too many people blame other people or society or structures or things. And I'm not saying that there aren't, systemic structures that stop people, women, different races. There are so many barriers in the workplace and in society and things, and I'm not minimizing those in any way whatsoever. But ultimately you can work to change those things, but on a personal basis, you can't. It's not going to benefit you by complaining about the world, because that doesn't push you forward. And so you kind of are where you are in the world, and you're dealt the cards that you're dealt. And in terms of accountability, I quite like it as a concept, because you can just tell yourself that everything that happens to you in your life is your fault, and it's not anyone else's fault, and you can change it. And the moment that you stop, you don't blame yourself. You can blame other people for doing bad things to you, but you are accountable. You're not
Yeah,
responsible, but you're accountable, and
yeah.
you can take the steps to change it. And when you this weird shift, because it sounds like an aggressive thing to tell somebody, but when it's almost freeing, because then you stop thinking that you need to rely on everybody else to solve your problems.
Yeah, it is about taking full responsibility for you and your career, and that doesn't mean that it's not about blame, but I think that no one else is going to care about your career as much as you do, and why should they? And I think that you're absolutely right that there are so many situations and circumstances and systemic failings, and people should and can work to improve that and make that better. But almost as well as that and alongside that, I think that if people take full responsibility for managing their career, then it gives you that sense of freedom, and it gives you that sense of purpose, and it gives you that sense of being a leader, being a self leader, and making things happen for yourself. Because it goes back to that, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it, how you respond to it, and what opportunities you seek out and create as
Mhm.
well.
I think that kind of brings us full circle to where we started, which is, like something like this comes along and you've got to like think creatively
Mm.
about what you're going to do, because life can hit you, as Rocky Balboa said.
Great
Nothing's
teacher.
gonna. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's I think that that's one of the biggest lessons that you can learn, that you're responsible, and then that frees you up to do whatever you want to do.
Definitely.
I think, I guess I'm going to make these a little bit shorter. So I mean, listen, it's been awesome speaking. Is there anything else that we haven't kind of talked about that you had thought, oh, we should?
Good question. Nothing, I don't think. I think that's been really great and really interesting. And it's the type of thing that I find really interesting to talk about. So I could probably talk about it all day. But yeah, there's nothing else in particular to
All right,
say.
listen, thanks so much for your time, and to the viewers, thanks so much for another episode of Unplanned with Phil Bland.
Very handy that your name rhymes with unplanned.
See you later.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.